Bronco Nation to my three keys to the game versus San Jose State. Boise State hosts the undefeated Spartans coming on the blue. Boise State, of course, 4-1, 4-0 in the Mountain West. This is a big matchup. There are only three Mountain West teams that are undefeated in conference play: Boise State, San Jose State, and Nevada. And the winner of this game will put themselves in position to be one of those two teams that face off in the Mountain West Championship game. So this is a big matchup this week. Fox thought so as well, and they're giving them the actual primetime slot here, 2 p.m., or the afternoon primetime slot, but they're putting them on the major network on Fox. So not FS1, not CBS Sports Network, or any of the minor ones, actually on Fox. This is huge. I can't remember the last time that Boise State played on Fox itself. Big network game. Fantastic opportunity for Boise State to go out there and impress in front of a huge audience and hopefully catch the eyes of some of the committee as far as getting into the rankings. If you want to know we'll talk at the end of the video here about Boise State chances a little bit as far as Group New Year's 6 goes, but most of my opinions I've already put down in my top 25 college football playoff reaction video / top 25 rooting guide. I encourage you to go watch that video, but this one we're going to examine the three keys to the game versus San Jose State and conclude with a summary about what this game means for Boise State. So, first key to the game is going to be Bachmeier needs to have a complete game. This Bachmeier, for the first time last week, had his first consecutive game. So he's played in 3 games this year, and last week was the first time that he'd had a consecutive game. So he played against Colorado State, and then he played against Hawaii. So the first time that he was able to actually develop and build on his performance from the game before. And it was his best game of the year by all statistical concerns. He had 21 completions, which was season high in completions. He had 278 yards, which was a season high for yards. He had a long of 55, which is his longest pass of the year. And he was only sacked once versus being sacked 3 times in the previous 2 games. He had a quarterback ranking of 84.1 overall, and that is his highest quarterback rating so far this year. So that showed Bachmeier is an incredible talent, but he was injured last year, and it took him a while to come back. Like I've said before, he wasn't really fully healthy going into that bowl game. So it took a whole offseason. He came back. He was a little bit rusty Utah State game. Still played great, but still a little bit rusty on some of his throws, and he is slowly building himself back up to where I think now, just in time for the San Jose State game, I think he's reaching his peak performance. I think he's going to have an incredible game. But that's what he's going to need to do, because he's really going to need to shoulder the load. Looks like right now, all official reports, we haven't heard anything about Helani. Unofficial, under the table whisperings, it seems like he's probably still out. He did not make the trip to Hawaii. He hasn't been put on that permanent list. That's when Boise State will announce injuries, as if a player is going to be put on that permanent out list. So he's still expected to come back, but it looks like it might still be a couple of weeks before he's back and healthy. But either way, nothing official, but it looks like Helani is still not going to be back for this game. So that having been said, Bachmeier, again, is going to have to shoulder the load in this game, which is good. San Jose State has given up 217.8 yards per game, and they played Air Force, who's not a high-passing team. So really the stats there are a little bit higher as far as the yards per game they're giving up. And of the 15 touchdowns they've allowed, so they've only allowed 15 touchdowns this year in 4 games. They've been very stingy on defense. They've allowed a high of 21 points against San Diego State. So they've been very stingy on defense, but of those 15 touchdowns that they've allowed, 11 of them have come through the air. So the opportunities will be there for Bachmeier, especially if he is reaching his peak, as I believe he will be, which is perfect time for him. I think that the number one key here is going to be Bachmeier needs to have a complete game, and I think he's going to have that. He's going to have to be, his receivers need to be on touch. Like I said in the last video, 2 dropped touchdown passes or probable touchdown passes. One was in the end zone, and one was there was nobody in the way of as far as defenders go. Both of those dropped, which would have been touchdowns. And then another ball that was tipped line of scrimmage that probably would have been a touchdown to Shakir. So he was a few completions away from having a much bigger game against Hawaii last week. I think that he's going to be more in tune, or his receivers going to be more in tune with him. And I think as far as his passing game goes, I think he's going to be a lot more accurate this game. I think he's really getting to that point that we saw last year before the injury, where he really stepped up and showed that he is that complete quarterback that he can be for Boise State. So that's going to be the number one key. Second key is going to be Van Buren needs to step up. So, like I said, looks like probably not going to have Kalani back as far as all official reports go. It looks like nothing official, of course, but looks like we just judging where Kalani didn't make the trip to Hawaii. Looks like we're not going to have Kalani back. But Van Buren last week had his best performance of the season, and it was a great performance. He had 27 carries for 113 yards and 2 touchdowns, and that wasn't just from being given the rock a bunch of times, being able to ground out the yards. He looked explosive. He looked fast. He looked quick off the step. He was able to cut. He was able to move downfield. He looked really, really good. For the first time, the season so far that he's played prior to the game against Hawaii, he's looked pretty inconsistent. He's slightly fast step, but not fast enough off this front. He runs hard when he hits defensive line. He's always falling forward, but he's not breaking tackles, and he's not avoiding tackles. That's what we've seen so far. But playing last week against Hawaii, he had an excellent game, looked like a completely different player, looked like a lot more like Kalani, looked a lot more like a player who can fill those shoes. And that's what if Boise State wants to get past the stingy Spartan defense, which, as I said, has only allowed 21 points per game, 21-point high. They're actually only allowing 15 points per game, or just over 15 points per game. If Boise State wants to get past that, they are going to need to have a two-threat offense. It can't all be on Bachmeier. Yes, the game is going to be majority on his shoulders, but it can't all be on Bachmeier. The run game has to be a factor. It has to be a threat to draw the defenders up so that Boise State's able to get the ball over the top of them. San Jose State has allowed 131.5 yards on the ground per game, only 4 touchdowns, and like I said, they've played Air Force, so they've only allowing 131.5 yards per game with Air Force, who pretty much ran the ball the whole time. Boise State allowed 400 yards against Air Force. So just to kind of keep that in perspective there, the run defense is very good for the Spartans. So it's going to be a much tougher matchup. But if Van Buren can play like he did last week with the cutting and the speed ability, which we hadn't seen so far this year, if he can play like that, I don't think he's going to go over 100 yards, but he's going to be a threat and a factor against the Spartans, which will cause them to have to keep more of an eye on him and move the defenders up, allowing Bachmeier more space down the field. The third key, and they say last is not least, so this is very true. This is probably the most important key of all of them. So last but not least, third key, defense needs to play all 4 quarters. Boise State, so far this season, is playing incredible first halves. They are allowing only 8.6 points per first half through 5 games, including against BYU. However, in the second half, Boise State is giving up 20.8 points per game. Over twice what they're giving up in the first half. 11.4 points per game in the third quarter and 9.4 points per game in the fourth quarter. The defense is and it's starting right out of the gate. It's not like the defense, and like against the BYU game, the factor overall, I think, in that game was that the defense got tired. But as far as scheming goes, they're giving out a lot of points right out the gate when they're not tired. Right out the gate, they're getting smacked in the mouth, they're getting hit hard, and the points are coming fast and heavy. Last week, Boise State was set up to have a very dominant win against Hawaii, and then Hawaii came out in the second half, put up a lot of points, ended up being a much closer game, 32-40 at the end than it should have been, which ended up giving Boise State less of a resume builder as far as all of that goes. So Boise State really needs to play consistent all 4 quarters. That same passion and fire that they come out in the first half, they need to play it that same way in the second half. And it's not just necessarily that the defense is giving up, though I think we saw that against Hawaii where they thought the game was in hand, they kind of backed off. Players weren't running to the ball, they weren't pursuing. But the offensive coordinators are finding a way to adjust to the Boise State defense, and Boise State is not finding a way to answer. And Boise State needs to have that ability to answer and come back if they're going to want to be a team that's in the conversation, and I know it's a slim chance, but in the conversation for New Year's Six. But even beyond that, if they want to be a team that can win their conference and a team that can go and beat a Power 5 team in a bowl game, whatever that game is, Boise State's going to need to improve their defense overall performance. And when we're talking about overall performance, they have 2 forced fumbles. That's it on the entire year. Didn't recover either of them, and they only have 2 interceptions. Now, Boise State should have maybe 4 or 5 more interceptions. They've had a lot of very close drops. You can watch my other reviews of the game videos if you want me to hear me talk about those. They've had some very close drops. Last week they had one right in the hands, right in the hands. Skinner had one right in the hands that he was looking downfield. It would have been a touchdown, been about a 40, 50-yard return for a touchdown. Was looking downfield at the end zone and let it just drop. I mean, it hit him right in the hands and he dropped it. So Boise State has had the opportunities, but they right now are on pace to have the least turnovers ever caused by a Boise State team in the last 2 decades. And I know they're playing less games, but they're also playing a lot of games against Mountain West competition that they should be forcing those turnovers. So they're playing less games, I understand that, but 2 interceptions in 5 games and no fumbles. Now, they have had some great blocks on special teams, but given that special teams is playing incredible, when you're talking about true turnovers, they have only had 2 interceptions all year. So they need to play consistent through all 4 quarters, and that needs to include some turnovers, I think, if Boise State wants to not just dominate against the Spartans, but to win this game against the Spartans, because this is going to be a challenging game. If they want to win this game against the Spartans, they're going to need to play all 4 quarters consistently, and I think they're going to need to come away with some turnovers to give some momentum to the offense here. So, and just talking again here, Boise State is San Jose State has allowed Boise State is averaging here we go. That's what I'm trying to say. Boise State is averaging 393.8 yards per game giving up on defense, and they're allowing 29.4 points per game. San Jose State, on the other hand, is scoring over 29.3 points per game and averaging over 407 yards per game. I mean, they're having an incredible year. So Boise State, if they want to stop that Spartan attack, the point total isn't as high, but it is as high as Boise State's giving up in points. But that offense, if they want to shut down that offense, 292.5 of those yards coming through the air game, which Boise State has really been challenged in the secondary, staying on receivers when the defense isn't able to get through to the quarterback, when it becomes a long time in the pocket. Boise State's secondary is having a lot of issue keeping a hold of the receivers there. So if Boise State's going to want to be able to win this game, they're going to need to put a cramp on that San Jose State defense and play all 4 quarters. So that's the 3 keys to the game. Bachmeier needs to have a complete game. Van Buren needs to step up, and defense needs to play all 4 quarters. So really the overall arching key is completeness. We need completeness from the quarterback play, completeness from the running back play, and completeness from the defensive play all game long. Okay, so summarizing here, looking at what's Boise State looking at this week. So Boise State is looking at Nick Starkel. He's a senior. He's a transfer. He previously played at Texas A&M and Arkansas. He's having one of the best seasons of his career. He's only played in 3 games, and yet in 3 games he has 980 yards, 9 touchdowns, and only 2 interceptions. He is a real threat. San Jose State is not, like most Mountain West teams, is not getting the respect that they deserve nationally. There's almost no attention on them at all, but San Jose State is having the best season of their recent history, and their quarterback is having an incredible year. He was injured for 1 game, but he's come back strong. He came back strong last week against UNLV. He is having an incredible year. As far as the run game goes, there's no real run game overall for the Spartans. They have their backup quarterback is actually the one with the most rushing yards at 177, but they do use him regularly. So even though Starkel is the starting quarterback, they do use their backup quarterback. Even last week when Starkel was starting, their backup quarterback rushed for 94 yards versus UNLV on 8 carries. So he's a real threat, kind of a wildcat look, but he is able to throw the ball if he has to, but he's very much a run threat, and Boise State's going to need to stop that. They've had issues stopping running quarterbacks. They struggled mightily last week against Cordero. I think if Hawaii had given the ball and just let Cordero run it on every single play, Hawaii might have even won that game. So Boise State has struggled with running quarterbacks, dual threat quarterbacks, so I think that San Jose State is going to see that, and they're going to mix in a lot of the backup quarterback in this game. Stash, I think, is his name, or Nash. I'm not entirely sure of the name. I apologize. I should have written that down. But anyhow, the backup quarterback, they're going to mix him into the game plan, so Boise State needs to be aware of that. He is their main running threat. As far as overall running, as far as running backs go, their main running back has just barely over 100 yards. I think it's 123 yards, but he has only carried the ball 23 times. He's averaging 5.1 yards per carry, so he's not ineffective. It's just that San Jose State is relying majority-wise on the arm of Nick Starkel, and that's what's working for them. So it's not that he can't run the ball, the running back. It's just that he's not getting all the opportunities. They're very much of a pass-heavy offense this week. So Boise State is going to need to clamp down defensively if they're going to want to win this one. It's going to be a lot closer, I think, than a lot of experts are looking at as far as overall in the game, though I think Boise State will pull away late. So Boise State, with Sears of Bachmeier, has not scored less than 40 points in any of the games that those players have been the primary starters throughout the game. with the exception, of course, being BYU. In those 4 games, Boise State is averaging 46 points per game. It's actually 45.75, but right about 46 points per game. I think that Boise State is going to, for the first time, I think they're going to put up 40 points on the Spartans. Highest points Spartans are going to allow for the first time. We'll get to my score prediction here at the end, but just to really sum up here, Boise State needs this to be a dominant win. But not just that, they need this just straight up win or loss either way. They need to get a win. So they just, even if it's not a dominant win, even if it's a couple point win, that'll be enough for Boise State's goals toward the Mountain West. But if they lose this game, Boise State is not going to be in control of their own destiny as far as the Mountain West Championship goes. So Boise State needs to win this game if they're going to stay with San Jose State and Nevada, and even Fresno State coming in from behind. And I think San Diego State is also 4-1 or 3-1, but only has 1 loss. So Boise State can't afford to get into that mix of the 1-loss Mountain West teams because there's a lot of them. And San Jose State and Nevada are undefeated right now. Boise State needs this win. They need to put business on the table first. They need to win this game if they're going to compete in the Mountain West this year. This is a big, probably this is the biggest Mountain West game of the year for Boise State and maybe for the conference. This is a big chance for the Spartans to knock off Boise State, so Boise State needs to be ready for that. So I think, but other than that, when you're looking at if Boise State has a shot at the New Year's Six, if you want to hear all the ways that Boise State could potentially get into that or how that factors in the conversation, watch my playoff poll reaction video / top 25 rooting guide. But right now, focusing on the primary factor, which is Boise State needs to get this win for the Mountain West. So, score prediction overall, Boise State, I think, is going to win this game. They're favored by 11.5 points. I think that the defense is going to finally step up. I think they're going to have hearing an earful from the coaches so far this season. I think they're definitely going to step up this game. I think Boise State offense is going to explode, 45 points. And I think San Jose State is going to sputter a little bit late there. I think they're going to come up with 31. So my score prediction is Boise State 45, that San Jose State 31. So thank you for watching this video. If you want to, again, I know I said I would talk about Boise State's chances of the New Year's Six, but I really covered it in depth, and I don't want to go, since I'm already at 16 minutes in this video, I don't want to cover that right now just because of how in depth I went in my other video. So again, if you don't watch that, I'll try and, if I can figure out the technology, I'll try and put the link in the description. But go back and watch my top 25 rooting guide video that I talk about that in depth. But if you want to root on Boise State with over 8,000 other Boise State fans from across the country, make sure you join Bronco Nation Updates. And again, thank you for listening to my video. I'll make sure to put out a review as soon as the game is finished. Look for that review Saturday night or Sunday morning. All right, thank you so much for watching this video, and go Big Blue!